The following podcast is created and sponsored by High Beam Ministry.
Why do we gossip?
Good question.
We gossip because we have nothing better to do, make time pass.
Why do we gossip? I think to feel better about ourselves and to attach ourselves to the other person that we're gossiping with, to connect.
We want to compare our own to theirs. We want to see that they're just as valuable as we are, that they make just as many mistakes.
Likely because it's kind of fun and it's kind of interesting and it plays to that low pot of everybody.
I think people gossip because they're focused on what's outside of them rather than what's inside. The ego loves drama. So the ego creates drama and focuses on drama so it doesn't have to feel its own pain.
It makes people feel like better to talk about other people's damage and brokenness.
Remember what you said last week about Amanda and Brad? How she got her job?
Huh?
Well, I saw them show up to work together this morning.
No. Oh, she's naughty. I've got something juicy.
Again?
Amanda's hooking up with Brad. They got caught having a moment in the parking lot. Guess she really gets around, eh?
Just stop. Think about what you're saying. Maybe Brad just gave her a ride to work.
Welcome to the Ersatz Coffee Shop. This is Jay, your Truth Barista, and I'm serving up a steamy cup of God's truth for the average Joe. You can catch me and this podcast on my websites, truthbarista.com, all one word, truthbarista.com, and highbeamministry.com. That's HIGHBEAM ministry.com, as in car high beam. We're shining the light of God's truth on the road ahead.
Well, Truth Barista, great to see you again. You know, I was just talking about you to somebody else the other day.
Really?
And I thought to myself, well, you know, I wonder if this was gossip. Because it wasn't always real negative, but, you know, it borderlined saying some things that I probably shouldn't have. So I have to apologize to you for that.
Well, I appreciate that, and I forgive you for that. But, you know, maybe we should sit down with a cup of coffee here during the break, and we should just talk about what gossip and slander and all that stuff is, because, man, you see that stuff is in churches worse than I think you see in the world at times, don't you think?
I think you're right. In fact, I was so intrigued and convicted that I went to the internet, and I have some statistics.
Okay.
I don't know if you knew that about 80% of our conversations are spent on discussing other people and their habits. Can you imagine?
Way.
80%. Now, here's a little test for you. Who do you think gossips more, men or women?
Oh, it's got to be women. Oh, I mean men. Men. Yes, it definitely is men.
You just did that to be politically correct with your wife. But the point is, it's not that much different. 55% of men's conversation is about gossip. 67% of women's conversation.
That's really close.
Yeah, it really is. And the other interesting thing is men call it networking when they gossip, and women tend to gossip more about who's in and who has merit. So whatever that means, but I think those statistics says it is a problem.
Yeah, well, when you think about it, and as we go through, let's talk about what gossip is and whatever, but do you realize we have an entire industries built around gossip? Now think of it. What does everybody sit there and read at the checkout line in the supermarket? They read the gossip magazines, the National Enquirer, the Star, all these other things, and then you start flipping through the radio stations, and you get the local gossip radio station we have here in the Twin Cities. I mean, on their billboards it says, hey, you want gossip? Come here. And then you start flipping through the TV channels. What do you have? TMZ, Entertainment Tonight, some of these other things. These are all gossip programs. They get fueled and they get ad revenue because they're gossiping about other people's business.
And somehow they are able to get away with it because they're saying this is information about people you care about, right?
Right. But do you really care about them?
No.
I mean, you're interested, but if you really cared about people, would you gossip about them?
No, because it's drama, right?
That's right.
I mean, the opening little clip that we used, this one gal says, well, it's about drama. And that's how I think these people use it. It's drama and they get away with it, but it really is gossip.
Yeah. Well, then the problem is in churches today, as if there's not enough drama among Christians, we have to spark even more by descending into this gossip and slander and sarcasm thing, you know?
So as we unpack the gossip issue, we know that it's not a good thing to gossip, but you have a kind of an analogy or a kind of a spiritual parable you use with the Old Testament, don't you?
Yeah, I found this one when I was studying through the first 5 books of the Bible, and a lot of people call it the law. And there's a law in there in the Torah that talks about leprosy. And you're going, how does leprosy relate to gossip? Well, let me explain it. The rabbis actually figured this one out quite a while ago because they look at words and they make words equate to other words, and there must be a truth between two similar words or phrases. So there is a word for a skin disease that spreads. It's under the skin. It exposes flesh. And we call it leprosy in the Bible, but it's actually a fun word called tzara'at, which means skin disease, right? Now, a person with this skin disease is called a metzora. Okay, that is a person with tzara'at. Well, in Hebrew, in the Bible, up until, say, the 600s, there weren't any vowels in Hebrew. It's all written with consonants. So you take the word metzora, and it looks like r, okay? Mm-hmm. Just those 3 letters. Well, the rabbis looked at it and they said, wow, that looks like another word or a set of words called motzi ra, just by changing the vowels. Metzora is a person with the skin disease. Motzi ra means from within comes evil. And so they went, wait a minute. Could it be that the skin disease is a manifestation of an evil that's inside? And then, knowing the scriptures like they do, they went, aha, there's Miriam. Miriam was bad-mouthing her brother Moses in Numbers chapter 9, and God came down and struck her with a skin disease.
You know, I love when you speak German.
Well, thank you very much.
I want to ask or add one other thing and tell me if I'm right on this, that leprosy is also, you don't feel with it. People who have it, they can cut themselves or touch something hot, they don't feel. So if it's a disease from within, there's no conscience that says, aha.
Yeah,
right?
You grow insensate to it. You lose the feeling of touch, so you can't contact the other person and sympathize or empathize with them. You become numb to their situation. That's why we can say the most horrible things about people, whether it's true or false, okay, and not feel one way or the other about it. So the rabbis looked at the situation of the person who has a skin disease, and they said, aha, so we have a correlation here. Miriam gets struck with a skin disease because she was bad-mouthing Moses. A skin disease renders a person, according to the Torah, the law, unclean. Now, what does unclean mean? It simply means you have contacted the arena or the area of death in such a way you can't approach God until you get cleaned up. And they did that through a blood sacrifice, right? So whether you touch a dead body or you touch a carcass or something of that nature, you're rendered unclean. And so the rabbi said, aha, it's not the thing that's on the outside that makes you unclean. The rabbis even taught it's the thing within you that makes you unclean, and it manifests as an unclean thing on the outside. Does that make sense?
Oh boy, and I know Jesus picked up on that theme too, because evil comes from within and so forth and so on. As he taught exactly the same thing.
Exactly. He's the one that was saying things like, oh, the rabbis were accusing his disciples of eating food without washing their hands and it made them unclean. And Jesus says, no. That's not what makes you unclean. What makes you unclean is the stuff from inside. It's the slander and the malice. And so Jesus says it's the things inside that make us unclean. Matthew 15 says this, for out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony. Those are pretty heavy-duty things, right? Okay. Well, then he says, and slander. These are what make a person unclean, but eating with unwashed hands doesn't make them unclean. And Paul, the Apostle Paul, also weighs in on this in 2 Corinthians chapter 12. He says this, and he's addressing the Corinthians, the Corinthian church that was splitting up into divisions and bad-mouthing one another. He says this, for I'm afraid that when I come, I may not find you as I want you to be, and you may not find me as you want me to be. In other words, he's coming ticked if they don't shape up. I fear that there may be, and here's the issues, quarreling, jealousy, outbursts of anger, factions, slander, gossip, arrogance, and disorder. And notice the bulk of those things are things that come from our lips, but the things that come from our lips are attitudes in our heart. That's what makes us unclean. And a lot of what you see in that text right there is division based on arrogance and disorder and factions and all these things. Tell me that gossip and slander and sarcasm doesn't divide the body.
And most of the time, again, correct me if I'm wrong, Truth Barista, but doesn't gossip usually happen amongst relationships? I mean, sometimes, we can talk about political figures and so forth in maybe some demeaning ways, but it's really how we talk about each other, people in our friendships or our family, our church life. Isn't that where it really begins to manifest?
That's true, because we get to know things about people, and you only do that through relationship. Hey, Larry, I know things about you that other people don't know.
I know, but I also deliver you coffee, and I can...
You're going to cut me off? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I could.
Okay, fine. Okay, well, then I won't divulge those things. But you know something? Let me tell you. Let's talk about what gossip and slander and sarcasm is, because this is important. What is gossip? Gossip is sharing a truth you have no right or permission to share. Got that? So there are things about you that I know that are absolutely true, but I don't have your permission to share them with other people.
Correct.
That's gossip. What's slander? Slander's the flip side. It's something that's untrue about you or false about you that I share as publicly or privately as anybody else, okay? So these are falsehoods or lies that we shouldn't spread. And then the third one that's really difficult is sarcasm. And you know me, I love words, right?
You do. Uh-huh.
So when you look at the original form of the word sarcasm, it comes from two Greek words, sarx, which means flesh, and chasm, which means to tear. So really, when you think about sarcasm, what are you doing? You're tearing into somebody. Some, in the vernacular, some people said he tore him a new one. You're literally ripping into a person, and those kinds of wounds go far deeper than a fleshly wound does, and they often don't heal as a fleshly wound does. So you see a lot of grown adults that are still affected by sarcasm that they experienced from parents or authority figures when they were kids. This can be a really serious issue because it affects people's lives. Who likes to be gossiped about? I mean, it's embarrassing. Who likes to have lies told about them? That's slander. That's just horrifying. And then to be torn into with sarcasm. Oh my gosh. What was it? A couple generations ago, there was a comedian, Don Rickles.
Oh, yes, yes.
That was his whole shtick. Was to rip people, and people thought it was funny. But outside of that, I mean, really, how can you find such humor in such an awful thing?
And that's a good point. Why do we find such humor in tearing people down in this way? Is it to build ourselves up? Or, as one person said in that opening clip, again, it's to kind of allow us to have the satisfaction of knowing we all make mistakes. And nobody is perfect. Therefore, as I share these things with you, it makes me feel good. Here's one I really like. Somebody comes up to me and says, well, did you hear about so-and-so? Now, I don't want you to gossip about it. I'm just telling you so we can pray intelligently about it.
Having been involved in church groups for many years, you got to realize that a lot of times gossip has got a prayer cover. That's what it is. You're just putting your garbage in a plastic bag called prayer and delivering it to people.
Right.
And really, prayer groups have to be very conscious about that. Christians have to be very aware about this. So when you do share something, God already knows the situation. And if it is a sensitive one and you're kind of concerned about the person you're sharing something with, I can just say, Larry asked me to pray for him, but it's a sensitive issue. So let's just pray for Larry and we'll let the Lord, he already knows, let's do that. But if it's a trusted thing, if I know that you're in our men's group, you can share something and go, you already know about this. Let's pray about that and help them out. It really comes from an inner attitude, doesn't it?
It does. And sometimes when you say what you just said, inside of me I go, now I wonder what that is.
Yeah. I think it's really fun. Having studied this and thought about this topic for a long time, I've come across some really fun quotes. And they call evil speech, the rabbis call evil speech. In Hebrew, it's lashon talete, which is the third tongue that slays three people: the speaker, the spoken to, and the spoken of. Okay?
Sounds like a mystery radio there.
I know, it does. Sir Philip Sidney said, no sword bites so fiercely as an evil tongue. And in a sense, what we're really talking about here is...
what we've got here is failure to communicate.
Okay, and even the Bible has really deep things to say about gossip and slander. Think about this. Solomon knew this issue. Proverbs 26 says the words of a gossip are like choice morsels. They go down into a man's inmost parts. Notice it said man's and not woman's. Got it? It says, without wood, a fire goes out. Without gossip, a quarrel dies down. And Proverbs 10 says, he who conceals his hatred has lying lips, and whoever spreads slander is a fool. Now, you're a fool because you're spreading a falsehood, and fool in this sense is a person who lacks moral character. So to lie about another person, you're really lacking moral character, is what's being said. And if you're concealing your hatred, think about it. Why do people gossip? Well, sometimes it's motivated by hatred of that person. You're tearing them down, either through gossip, slander, or sarcasm, in order to build yourself up. That's the ego thing.
Or as you said, it justifies the anger somehow, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When you're gossiping.
At least in our minds.
It does. It justifies us. That's how it seems when I have gossiped. It is a justification.
Now, it says we are to confront sin, but it says to confront it, to speak the truth in love. How can you say that gossip is involved with love in any way? How can we say that slander is involved in love in any way, or sarcasm is loving in any way? We can't. But we can speak the truth in love, and this is my point. If you've got something with another person you want to deal with, you don't talk to a third person about it. You go right to that person. That's what Matthew 18 says. That's the truth. That's the truth of God's word. You go to that person and you deal with that. If you hear something through the grapevine, if you're not a part of the answer, if you're not a part of the problem, back out. You can stop gossip with you. Now, sometimes it's tough to do because, let's face it, gossiping is fun, right? We like to deal with people at the gossip level.
And it is harder because sometimes we present gossip in the form of, this is a problem.
Yeah.
So because it is a problem, as a leader in the area of influence you have to listen to the problem. Otherwise, you'll be known as a leader that doesn't want to listen.
Exactly. And one of the criteria for a Christian leader, especially pastors or elders, you got to keep your mouth shut because you're going to be privy to a lot of sensitive information. And that's why there is this aspect of pastor, church member, or pastor seeker confidentiality. You have to be able to keep a confidence. Confidence means with faith. I have spoken it to this person with faith. They're going to keep their darn mouth shut, right? That's important. Now, what I also find interesting is James deals with this topic of why is gossip so fun and why it's so dangerous. He says in chapter 3, the tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole person. That's that idea of makes unclean, and sets the whole course of his life on fire and is itself set on fire by hell. We have to understand that the power of life and death is in our tongues because we can deeply influence somebody else's life, either for the good or for the worse.
Well, the image of that is those fires that are constantly going on in California. They burn hundreds of thousands of acreage, and it could have been just a little spark somewhere from a campfire or a cigarette or something, and wow, look what happens.
So in an analogy, you could say,
remember, only you can prevent forest fires.
And that's the same kind of a concept that we have with James. I mean, with James, he's talking to Christians, right? And now we're talking to Christians specifically here. He says in verse 10 of chapter 3, out of the same mouth comes praise for God and cursing. My brothers, this should not be. How can a spring produce fresh water and salt water? It can't. And if it does, something is wrong. So if we're not controlling our tongues and yet we're coming to God with praise, there's something wrong inside. And that's how that ugliness manifests then outside because it's motivated by the thoughts and attitudes of the heart.
So if I come to a praise service on Sunday morning and I start in my normal praise routine, should I pray before I come, Lord, before I set forth in this praise, convict me of those things that I probably did by form of gossip this week so I can be clean before you?
I would do that, and I'd expand it out even further. One of the things that I encourage the congregation to do all the time, and then actually throughout life is, before I come to you, Lord, remember the evil inside is what makes us unclean, right? Unable to approach God. How often has God taken a congregation and said, I'd really like to listen to your praise today, but I'm going to hold you, the whole congregation, at arm's length until you guys deal with these issues inside you that are making you unclean. But yet you get a bunch of people in a congregation who all prepare their hearts ahead of time and say, Lord, whatever is there making me unclean on the inside, I purpose to make things right, because even if I can't right now, I want you to forgive me in Jesus through his sacrifice, cleanse me on the inside so that I can draw near. And people go, wow, that service was really good today. I really felt the Lord's presence. Yeah, because you cleaned up before you came in. That's that unclean, clean idea that links into this. Well, it doesn't just extend to lustful thoughts and all these other things going around. It's the garbage on the inside, the gossip and the slander and the malice, like you were talking about.
So there is a stage of treatment, and you've been talking a little bit about that here. But as we kind of draw this to a conclusion, tell us where we should go in succinct format.
If you happen to be the one that's gossiped about, you're the one who would really like to pick up the first stone and just absolutely crush the other person. In fact, that attitude is often this.
Go ahead, make my day.
Okay, well, with God, that's not really the way we should do it, right? Okay, but we can take a cue from this previous thing. On skin diseases. The priest would examine the person to find out if it really is something that needs to be treated. Second of all, they would isolate them to see if it spreads. After that, they would re-examine them, and if it seems to be healing, they would restore them. Or if after the second examination, it's still spreading, they need to isolate them some more until the problem is resolved. And I thought, that's a great way to approach this in any group, whether it's in a church or a business or whatever. If gossip or slander or sarcasm is manifesting in a person's life, it's what they're saying. I think one of the first things we should do is examine it to say, is this true? Are you gossiping about people? And after that, there should be some type of an isolation. What does that mean? Just look at the other person there and say, you've been gossiping a lot lately. I'm not talking to you about that subject anymore. Or this is totally out of bounds. Or, I'm just not talking to you until you clean up your act. And it's that simple. And then the person has to do their examination of themselves. Am I really doing this? Because a lot of people are unaware that they're being sarcastic or slanderous or even gossiping. It just is natural to us.
You told me of an illustration from the life of Abraham Lincoln that's sort of along that line, right?
Oh, it's great. During Lincoln's administration, a delegation from a western state had been called with a written protest against a certain appointment he made. I mean, we get all this. Think of the Supreme Court justices now. Same type of thing, right? Well, in particular, the paper that they handed to him had specific objections about a Senator Baker. He was a longtime beloved friend of the president, right? These objections were definite reflections on Baker's character. So Lincoln sits there and he's holding the paper in his hand, and with his typical calm dignity, he says, "This is the paper which you've given to me about Senator Baker?" And they said, "Why, yes, it is." And he says, "And I can do with this as I please?" And they says, "Why, yes, you can, Mr. President." And Lincoln leaned over to the fireplace to toss the paper and burned it up, and he says, "Bye." And I think that's a lot of times what we just need to do with gossip. Somebody comes to you with something like this. If you're not a part of the problem, if you're not a part of the answer, burn the paper. It stops with you. And really what it comes down to is Psalm 34 is one of my really, really favorite verses. "Whoever of you loves life and desires to see many good days, keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking lies." That's gossip and slander right there. We may not think it's a big deal until it happens to us. So maybe we should use that feeling and do unto others as we would have them do unto us. And with that, I think I need another cup of espresso, Larry.
Yes, I think you do, and I'm going to go get it. And here I was going to tell you the story about our new busboy, but I don't think I should.
Okay, well, unless I'm part of the problem or unless I'm part of the answer, I don't really care. So how about that espresso?
I'm getting it right now.
Hi, this is Pastor Jay Christensen, your Truth Barista. I want to thank you for coming here to High Beam Ministry. And in this ministry, we have a plethora of great things for you to explore. Obviously, you're listening to this podcast, and we want to thank you for that. But hey, sidle on over to the other page and check out the Frothy Thoughts blog. And we have a new thing coming, a book. It's called Frosty Thoughts from Your Truth Barista, and it's the first cup. And we'll have more books coming throughout this year based on our blog. Plus, you're going to enjoy some new teachings we'll be posting on the feasts of the Lord and their prophetic significance with Jesus' first and second coming, and a wonderful video study on the book of Daniel. So those teachings will be coming up this year as well. So we want to invite you to contact us at highbeamministry@gmail.com if you have any questions. Love to answer them, but just keep coming back. Subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the articles. You'll be notified when new material drops. Thanks for joining us.
Some people think ministry is only centered in the church. The problem is that Jesus told us to go into the whole world with his message. That means he wants us to go to work in fields all over the earth and cultivate the soil in people's hearts to receive the gospel. Ministry may begin in the church, but it ends in a field sowing seed. Thanks for joining us.